Hello Internet and welcome to the Techie Pensioner. So this time I'm going to be talking about how we set up streaming at the church that I attend, and I thought it was most appropriate to actually be in the church building so that perhaps you can see some of the challenges and issues that we had setting it up. So bearing in mind that I know nothing about streaming in 2020 and we suddenly had to learn how, which I'll come on to in a little while. I thought, first of all, it was probably worthwhile talking about where we were in 2020. So in about 2008, the church that I belonged to raised funds to professionally have installed a projector at the back of the church and a screen at the front of the church. This in itself had its challenges. The screen and projector are probably around about 40 feet away from one another. So the projector had to have a long throw lens. And the building itself is reasonably bright. So let me show you the building. I've got a control here on my iPad, and I can show you more of the building so that you get an idea what it's like. So let's just pull back from me. So I have chosen a bit of a dull day, I admit, to do this on. The church isn't as bright as it normally is, and I have got the lights on to help. But it is quite a bright building, and that's part of the reason we had issues. If you have a look up here, do you see that little white bar up there? I'm going to zoom in on that a little. Let's zoom in a little. Yep. That little white bar up there, that was the projector. And the projector would just drop down, motorised projector would drop down. And there were a number of issues with that, but mostly it was about how bright this corner is and the fact that on very bright days it was really quite hard to see the screen. And being a projected image, we couldn't actually make the projector any brighter, so we were a bit limited with that. But it worked pretty well for us for about 10 years. In the meantime, I had my eye on all those sort of things that, all the technology that's around. And one of the biggest problems was how expensive large screens were. And we decided we couldn't really do anything until about 2018, when large screens became a price that we could afford. And affordability is going to be one of the key things that I'm going to talk about today, because the church doesn't have a huge technology budget. It has a small technology budget, and all of the design decisions and everything that I did to help the church stream worship had to be done on a very tight budget. One of the other criteria that was that other people needed to be able to use it, not just me. Let me also show you. I'm going to show you the whole church, as much of the church as I can. So this is our building. We've got that nice bright window with a big cross on it. And in 2018, screens became affordable, big screens particularly. So these are, believe it or not, they don't look very big screens, do they? But these are 75-inch screens. And we've got one on either side of the church. There we go. We're going to get picture in, picture in, picture in, picture now. But they're pretty big screens. So originally, when we had the projector and the screen fitted professionally, and we had to find a way of getting signals to those TVs. And they're quite a long way away. I mean, it's hard to tell from this picture, actually, but if you take cables around the outside of the church, it's sort of 30 metres in that direction and 30 metres in that direction. And it's a long way to actually take cables. Our controls are at the back of the church, and we had to find a way of getting cables round to these TVs. And we tried multiple ideas. So when I started to look around for ideas on what we could possibly do, I tried initially some like converters. It's like a small transmitter and a small receiver, two small receivers, one for each of these TVs, but also we have a TV at the back. In fact, I'm looking at that TV at the moment for whoever's standing here so that they can see what's going on in the church as well and what's going on the screens without having to bend round sideways to see what's going on. So we had to find a way of doing that. So I tried these receivers, and basically what you do is you take HDMI and you plug it into a little box, and then the little box turns it into Ethernet. You run the Ethernet around the outside of the church. You have little boxes on the back of each of the TVs, and those little boxes are receivers, and they turn it back into HDMI, and the HDMI goes into the TVs. First attempts were a bit hit and miss. I could get that screen to work, and that one would flash on and off. And after some attempts, I gave up on that idea and decided that I'd try HDMI cables. Maybe I could get 8 long HDMI cables. So I tried that next. That sort of worked, and it didn't work. There are two things that it can cause. One is signal quality by the time it's gone that distance. And 30 meters is about the maximum distance you can run an HDMI cable. So signal quality, but also latency. And we ended up with some that were really quite poor latency. The one that we've ended up with, eventually I went back to, having tried many of them, I'll show some of them now. We tried lots and lots and lots of different types, and eventually I found some that actually worked pretty successfully, and they've been working pretty successfully ever since. We still have minor issues. One of the things is, which I've never quite understood, is they seem to blow up power supplies. And when I say blow up, I don't mean explode. I mean they just fail. Almost every power supply has failed on every one of these devices. And one of the replacement power supplies that I've put on them has also failed. So if anyone out there knows anything about these transmitters and receivers for sending video over long distances and can recommend some that don't damage their own power supplies, then I'd be very happy to hear from you. Anyway, eventually, as I say, we managed to work it out. And even though there is about a half a second delay, so if the person at the front gets very animated, then the people in the congregation who are actually watching the feed on these screens can actually see that there's a bit of a delay. And if you throw your arms around a lot, you can't tell that there's any problem, but everyone in the church can actually see that there's a sort of half a second delay. But I think we've learned to live with that. So that was one of our first problems, and ongoing problems, in all honesty. I've tried lots and lots of different solutions. I tried HDMI over Wi-Fi, HDMI wirelessly. That latency was really not very good with that, even though they actually got good images on the screens. So yeah, we've tried lots and lots of things, and I've got to give a shout out for Amazon, because I think without Amazon, and particularly their buy, try, and return policy, I don't think we would have got this done. It would have just ended up being far, far, far too expensive. So thanks, Amazon. I know lots of people have mixed feelings about Amazon. I do myself, but for this particular purpose, they were invaluable. Anyway, that was the end of 2018. We had the screens fitted. And then, of course, we only had around about a year before COVID-19 struck. And suddenly we couldn't meet in worship anymore. And the minister of the church that I belonged to, was also the circuit superintendent, phoned me and said, "Nick, we need to learn how to stream worship." And well, that's been quite a journey, and I'm still learning, and we're now 6 years beyond that, and I'm still learning new things every day. So I've been using a Plord Note Pro, which I might talk about in a different podcast, to make notes for me while I just chatted on, and I've got the notes in front of me that it's made. And this section, it's called the COVID Catalyst, Pivoting to Live Streaming, which I think sounds very impressive. So as I said, there were two things that guided our thoughts about what we could do in our church. One was that the cost had to be as low as possible. and the other was that it needed to be something that other people could use, not just me. So I started to look around. Everyone at the time was talking about Zoom, of course, and the way Zoom expanded its user base was quite remarkable at the time. But Zoom didn't really sort of fit the usage. I really thought from the beginning that we wanted to stream worship on YouTube, and that having participation from people online wasn't something I wanted to get involved with. But we did want to stream worship. Everyone at the time was talking about OBS, Open Broadcasting Software, for very obvious reasons, that it doesn't actually cost anything because it's freeware. However, my experiences with OBS were less than stellar. I did try using it a few times. I just found it really difficult to get my head around. It's a very powerful piece of software, but being written by so many different people, it is actually quite tricky to get your head around. And again, I wanted something that anyone could use, and really OBS just felt overkill for what we wanted to do with it. So I continued to look around for quite a while. I did go to seminars that the district, so my Methodist district is quite a big area, and they were putting on seminars about how to stream using OBS, because they realised that lots of churches, now that they couldn't meet together, wanted to be able to stream worship. And in the meantime, I was looking around to see if there was anything else out there. And I stumbled across, as I often do on YouTube, a small company led by two brothers. Two brothers were the programmers, and they formed a company called Ecamm Live. So Ecamm Live, its initial, like a lot of these things, I mean, OBS was often used for streaming video games and that kind of thing. So they had other uses. And Ecamm Live was really about vlogging and podcasting, and not really meant for churches. However, I think there are quite a lot of churches that now use Ecamm Live. And so what attracted me to Ecamm Live? Well, in all honesty, it was the drag and drop interface. And of course, it was on a Mac. It's only available for the Mac. And being a Mac guy, I think I've probably said that in a previous vlog. Being a Mac guy, I wanted to use a Mac if I could. And it just so happened that I had a spare Mac Mini at home, which I could lend to the church, which is what I did. And the thing I liked about Ecamm Live, it's easy to set up scenes, and you can drag video into scenes, you can drag audio into scenes, and they just play. There's no complicated setup or command line interfaces, or it just works. And I really liked Ecamm as a consequence of that. And most importantly, it was relatively easy to use. And I was thrilled to find it. It did exactly what we needed at the time. So Ecamm was installed on the church computer. And originally we used to have to go onto YouTube to actually set up. The way that streaming works is you have to set up like a receiver on the YouTube end to actually stream into, like a container almost. But they've continued to improve Ecamm over the years. Ecamm now has its own built-in system which automatically writes the relevant information across into YouTube for you, so you don't actually have to touch YouTube. And having said that, I didn't want to be involved in Zoom. They actually integrated Zoom into Ecamm as well. So look up Ecamm. It's now called Ecamm, by the way. It used to be called Ecamm Live, but they very recently changed their name to just Ecamm, E-C-A-M-M. And if you're looking for something that is simple to use for streaming, certainly give it a look. It's quite impressive. The only drawback with it, and it might put people off, is that it's a subscription service. You can't buy it outright. It doesn't work that way. But I thought it was worth that payment for the reliability and the ease of use. So, of course, we had to find a way of getting video from the church. And again, I searched a lot online, and I eventually found, I think it was on eBay, I found a Chinese company called Minray, Minrray, that made a pan-tilt zoom camera. So you've already seen a pan-tilt zoom camera in operation. Let me show you. So, so this is the pan-tilt zoom camera. As you can see, it's now zooming out. And it's also tilted then. But I can tilt it in any direction. I can go from left to right. And I can go up and down. And you can also have presets, which is what I have been using. So when it comes to me, this is a preset I have set as pulpit. And it comes to me. It's a little bit off center. There you go. I can control it manually. So there are a number of presets. And one of the advantages is I can control it over Wi-Fi on my iPad. So, and the reason I can do that is because it uses a protocol called NDI. That's Network Device Interface. And there's quite a lot of acronyms in this area of tech, the same way there is in every area of tech. And NDI enables video to be streamed across Ethernet. So it compresses the video and sends it efficiently and with a fairly low bandwidth, really, across Ethernet cables. Not only that, the camera is powered over Ethernet as well. So there's literally just one cable goes to the camera, and the camera sits at the back of the church. It also has a 30 times zoom. So let me see if I can show you this. Oh, yeah, let's go and have a look at the Bible sitting on the... There you go. You can't quite read the Bible, but you can see how close you can actually get with the 30 times zoom. It's pretty impressive, really. Yeah, it's struggling to focus at that distance, but it's pretty good, isn't it? And this has made videoing stuff in church much easier because literally it's just one controller, and usually I control that and where the camera's pointing and when and how. NDI's very useful. I must admit, I'm glad I stumbled across a camera that had it to start with, because lots and lots of things can connect to it. It's a network interface, so anyone connected to Wi-Fi technically could control the camera, and as long as you've got the right settings, of course. One of the other things we did during the last few years was we had issues with Wi-Fi to start with. Many years ago, Wi-Fi was put into the building, but it was put in the office where we thought it would be most useful, which is off in that direction and through a couple of doors, and it meant that our Wi-Fi in here was pretty atrocious. So at some point, BT came to us to tell us that we needed to upgrade our line to digital. So while they were doing that, we asked them to put in a line directly into the church sanctuary here, and the modem actually sits in this part of the building now, which means that our streaming is much more reliable. And not only that, because the modem is close to where the equipment is, it's actually plugged directly in. We don't rely on Wi-Fi for that particular purpose. And I think that's quite important. If you can get it plugged in, get it plugged in. Wi-Fi can be a bit flaky. And, I've tried all sorts of things, so I know that they don't always work how you'd expect them to. So our biggest challenge was probably audio. I defy anyone to say that audio is easy. It really isn't. Bearing in mind that we have to have audio in here so that people in here can hear what's being said, it's being amplified, but we have to be able to hear it online as well. We struggled. I think it's fair to say we struggled. We tried all sorts of different things. I've got one or two pictures of the different audio interfaces that we tried. We didn't want a big soundboard. The fact is we're not a church who has a big band and needs multiple microphones. Literally a couple of microphones is okay for us most of the time. And we used them for quite a long while. We tried lots of different things. I decided early on unfortunately, I'll say fortunately and unfortunately, we had a bespoke sound system that was actually fitted. And recently I had a chance to see inside some of the equipment, and it literally is built from components. This is, he didn't go out and buy stuff off a shelf. He actually the guy who fitted it built it from scratch, literally buying the amplifier section and putting it in a box and all the wiring, and it was all done manually. But this restricted us quite a lot as well. There were very few inputs on the system because originally when we asked for it, we just wanted microphones. So very early on, I decided that we needed to be able to control the microphones individually, and we need to be able to do that from the same place that we were streaming from. So basically, our internal sound system is the end of the audio stack. It goes into the sound system once it's been through the microphones, through the cables, and into the audio interface that we eventually ended up with. Now, the audio interface we decided on buying eventually was a Zoom PodTrack P8. And again, just trial and error, really, trying all sorts of different things. This is a cool piece of kit. It's actually, again, really designed for vlogging and podcasting, and you can actually put batteries in it, and you can actually take it out into the field and use it to control recording in the middle of a field if you wished. Obviously, we don't use it that way. What I liked most about it was the fact that it had sliders to control the audio. Some of the ones we'd tried before had knobs you turned, which I don't know, I just found a little bit less intuitive to use. And you can mute each track individually, and that mattered a lot. It has 6 inputs for XLRs, and which meant that we could use as many microphones as we would normally want to. And you can also put audio into it from the computer. You can plug it into your computer and have it behave like a sound interface for the computer, which we needed to get audio into Ecamm. And also it had outputs so that we could come out of it and go into our church sound system. It took a while to get there, and we tried lots of different things. Some of our earliest videos, the sound quality is not good. It really isn't very good at all. I think we're doing pretty well now. I think I'm pretty happy with it. One of our most recent purchases, we have other churches that use our building, and they're not always as careful with our equipment as we'd like them to be. And as a consequence, things would break, cables would break. We invested in let me show you this. There we go. They're Phoenix Pro audio microphones. I'm using one here. And there's a receiver at the back which plugs into the audio interface. They seem to work. They're pretty rock solid, it seems to me. At last, we seem to have found a solution. So we're not breaking cables. We're not damaging bits of kit, because literally we just get these out and plug them in and switch the box on at the back, and away we go. And they seem to work pretty reliably on the whole. They use rechargeable batteries, and batteries you can remove. They're removable rechargeable batteries, which makes them very easy to keep. And we have a number of rechargeable backups just in case these fail. But they've got a nice little readout on them to show you how charged they are. So we get an indication when we need to recharge them. I can recommend them if you're looking for a wireless solution. They're pretty good. The other thing we looked at was we used to have a little clip-on microphone, and that used to plug directly into our sound system. And it took me a while. I tried lots and lots of different ones. Some worked quite well. Some the sound quality wasn't particularly good. Some of them were very cheap. Some of them were not so cheap. And the ones we eventually ended up with are the DJI Mic Mini, and they're tiny. I mean, they're really very small. I'm not wearing one today, but they're about this big, and they clip on very easily. They have one of the things that I really like about them is they come with a magnet, quite a powerful magnet, which means that you can just put the magnet inside your clothing just here, and then you can just slap on the microphone on the outside, and they work very well as well. Again, they're originally designed for podcasting and for vlogging and for plugging into your phone, but we're using it in a church setting, and they work very well. Took us a long time to get to that point. As I say, I'm still buying equipment to actually make the audio easier and better and more reliable. So one of the things we needed for church was to be able to display graphics on the screens, and particularly lower thirds at the bottom of the screen down there, down here. Yeah, I needed to be able to show lower thirds to put our hymn words on. We didn't want to take up the full screen. We just wanted to be able to show the church with the words at the bottom of the screen. Years ago, we used something called Proclaim. Again, Proclaim is a subscription service, but it was specifically designed for churches to record, to project data onto screens. And it had a way of basically outputting what Ecamm saw as a camera. So most of it is transparent, so you can see all up here, but the bottom section is not transparent and actually has the words on. And not only that, it is a database of all our church hymns that we sing, which is, very useful. And we used Proclaim for quite a while. Eventually, I started to look around again because it was getting quite expensive, actually, just to use Proclaim for that. Proclaim was a much more powerful piece of software than that, and we were only using a tiny bit of it. And I looked around to try and find if I could find something that was simpler or and certainly cheaper, and eventually managed to find something called Free Show. Now, Free Show, by its name, is free software, and it also has the ability to output data as a camera in the same way as we did with Proclaim. So I was very pleased. It took a little bit of fiddling because one of the other tools that we used, and this is the thing that I concentrated on because it was really complicated, all of this stuff coming together. I needed to find a way of making it simpler. And what I found was a Stream Deck. So if none of you have seen a Stream Deck, here's a picture of one. A Stream Deck is basically programmable buttons. You can program them with images. You can program them with, if you use a camera, it shows what the camera's looking at, which is quite useful. But you can program anything onto these buttons pretty much. And Ecamm actually had a plugin for Stream Deck. Free Show didn't, but there's another tool you can use. I'm not going to go into it now. It was complicated to set up, but it works very reliably now. I think there's probably things I've forgotten. I've really just let a flow of consciousness go, as I usually do with these videos. And I may do a follow-up video with stuff that I've forgotten to mention. But that's pretty much where we are today. So we use a pan-tilt zoom camera at the back of the church. All our equipment is back at the church. We have a Mac Mini that drives our Ecamm and the other software that we use for streaming. Setting it up each week is just a matter of going into Ecamm and updating some of the scenes within it to show like our banner heading at the beginning of the service, to put in any liturgy that we may want. One of the nice things about Ecamm, you can use projection software with it, like sort of PowerPoint or that kind of thing. But I've found it easier if you just output whatever it is you want to put on the screen to PDF. That seems to work most reliably. And again, there are buttons on the Stream Deck which enable that to happen. The person who normally operates it, I've got buttons on the Stream Deck for operating the hymn words, so we have to move the hymn words manually. But that's not a problem. There are buttons. You just press a button on the Stream Deck and it moves it on a little bit, and then again and again until you get to the end of the hymn, and then we have a blank. So it's very easy to use. Again, that's evolved over time. We can also move on the PDFs. So if we've got liturgy showing or images showing on the screen, we can actually step through them using a button on the Stream Deck. We can even invoke. This is something that Ecamm added fairly recently. You can invoke a camera movement by pressing a button on the Stream Deck. The Stream Deck's been invaluable, really, in trying to keep the actual operation of the whole thing each Sunday simple. As a consequence of all this work, we continue to stream worship each week, reaching people who can't get to church, but also people all over the world, it appears. We have 100 subscribers, which is gratifying, and I realise that's tiny in comparison to most vloggers. I'm pleased that it's offering worship to those people who might struggle to get to church. And I know that there are other people in our circuit. So my church is part of a circuit of 13 churches. And I know there are other people from other churches who watch it when they can't get to their own worship. And that's gratifying. So, feedback. I'd be interested to know what you think about this video. I'd be interested to know if you're interested in setting up your church for streaming and how you'd go about it. I'd be interested to know if you have tried any of the things that we've tried. I'd be interested to know if you have a solution to the little black boxes that take our signals around the church to the TVs at the front. I'd be interested to know if you found a way of doing that without blowing up the power supplies. That would be a real treat, because at the moment we keep spare power supplies in the church just in case, because they seem to go randomly. And when I say blow up, they don't physically blow up; they just fail. Some of them have little lights on the plugs. The lights stay on, but it stops transmitting video or receiving video. So if anyone's got any ideas on how we can fix that, I'd be very grateful for your feedback. So as usual, as everyone who does vlogs these days, please like and subscribe if you can. At the moment, I think we've got just over 20 subscribers, but I'd love to see more of you if you're interested in the stuff that I talk about. And I think it's fair to say, so far it's been very varied, and I'll try and keep it as varied as I can. But there are definitely gadgets that I think you might be interested in. The Plord Note Pro, which I bought recently, is a wonderful piece of kit. It's basically an audio recorder, which then uses AI to turn it into like meeting minutes, and I think it's quite remarkable anyway. So I'll perhaps talk about that another time. Thank you for watching, and see you next time. Bye.